Welcome to the Center for Baptist Leadership podcast, hosted by William Wolfe. Our mission is to cultivate courageous and biblical Baptist leadership for the 21st century. We aim to revitalize the Southern Baptist Convention from within, defend it from those who seek its destruction, and serve as a better Baptist voice in the public square.
All right, welcome back to this episode of the Center for Baptist Leadership podcast live stream. Going back-to-back days here, which is great. Getting to the swing of things. I had Pastor Tom Askell and Sam Webb on yesterday to talk about the terrible Christianity Today article over Easter, calling to question the crucifixion of Christ, a very theological conversation. Today, we're joined by brother and pastor Rhett Burns from South Carolina to talk about another very important issue, a critical issue in the life of the Southern Baptist Convention, and that is financial transparency. It's time for the SBC to doge or die, because that's what's going to happen. If we don't open the books, if we don't show the churches of the Southern Baptist Convention how their tithe dollars are being stewarded and how we are holding our entities accountable to the mission that we've entrusted them with, people will stop giving. Churches will keep leaving, as they already are, and the Southern Baptist Convention might find itself in the same position as the PCUSA did this past week when it shut down its international missions agency. Rhett does not want to see that happen. So Rhett, thank you for joining us today. Introduce yourself to our listeners, and then we'll get right into it.
Thank you, William. Appreciate you having me on again to talk about financial transparency in the SBC. I am a pastor in Travelers Rest, South Carolina, small town in the upstate of South Carolina, Greenville area. Been a Southern Baptist all my life, served with the International Mission Board for 7 years, been back in South Carolina about 8 years, first as associate pastor, now as pastor at First Baptist Travelers Rest, and been involved in the effort to secure increased financial transparency in our convention for the last couple of years. And so, again, thanks for having me on to talk about that today.
Yeah, Rhett, you've been on a few times before. Good to have you back. I had the chance to go visit your church last fall, which was wonderful to see the good work you're doing there at First Baptist Church Travelers Rest. So, I mean, you're just a pretty normal Southern Baptist pastor, right? And I don't mean that in any way, shape, or form as a put down. We need
below average Southern Baptist pastor here. Yes.
No, man, you're right in the fairway. But you've picked up this incredibly important issue to advocate for in Southern Baptist Convention life. Just remind people why. Why are you doing this? Why are you making enemies, burning time, spending your own resources to fight to make the SBC better?
That's because I love the SBC and I love what the SBC does together. I love the Great Commission. We are a group of thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of churches who come together to do missions primarily, and ministries and theological education. To do that together, this is important work that we can do better together than we can just all on our own. And I believe in that work, and I want to see it continue faithfully into the future. We have inherited from our fathers and mothers in the faith a wonderful convention that does some really great work. I mentioned earlier, I served with the International Mission Board for 7 years, and that was wonderful. Some of the best people I know served with the International Mission Board. We had a great experience there, and there are a lot of people doing really great work all around the world among unreached peoples and places for the sake of Christ and the gospel, and want to see that continue. But we have a crisis of trust within our convention, and that lack of trust is leading to a lack of participation in the mission together, a lack of cooperative program giving. Cooperative program giving is declining, I think, for the last at least 15 years. Maybe it's something like 10,000 churches over the last 15 years have disengaged from the cooperative program. I'm sure there's a number of reasons for that, but lack of trust in our institutions, lack of trust in about convention finances, those are among the reasons. Giving so far this year has been down. It's 5% in February. I don't know, maybe 3% last month, something like that. But what we see is our mission together is at risk. I don't want to see that. I think transparency, it's not the silver bullet that's going to solve all of our problems, but it is a key component of any effort to restore trust within our convention so that we can do missions and ministry together going forward. So that's why I'm involved.
Well, I appreciate that, brother. So you're trying to get us to take our medicine, so to speak, right? It's like the Southern Baptist Convention is not particularly healthy right now. That's what all the numbers show. That's what the chatter and the conversation reveals. People decry divisiveness and arguing about tertiary things, but the raw numbers show churches are leaving, voting with their wallet and their feet to get out of the Southern Baptist Convention. If they're staying in, they are not giving to the cooperative program, which is the engine that runs the Southern Baptist Convention. If the cooperative program is the engine, the giving is the gas, it's the fuel. And if that declines, then we're going to putter along and eventually, maybe even go belly up. Obviously, that's being threatened right now with all the money that's been spent on these ridiculous lawsuits coming out of the so-called, sex abuse crisis in the SBC. And the medicine that you're trying to prescribe to us right now is increased financial transparency. So remind people who are listening to this, some people may be familiar with your work. Maybe other churches are just starting to tune in because we're going to be in Dallas here in like 6 weeks. What is the financial transparency that you are looking for from our entities?
Sure. Well, this is an effort that precedes my involvement by a number of years. There's been just steadily over the last maybe 10 years or so, maybe more that I'm just not aware of, but at annual meetings of people making motions asking for some sort of increased financial transparency. There's been motions related to forensic audits, and there's been motions related to certain things at certain entities, such as the North American Mission Board, things of that nature. I got involved in 2023 at the annual meeting in New Orleans, making a motion asking for what we call 990 level transparency. Basically, the motion asked that all of our entities would publish information in the same scope and detail as found on the IRS Form 990. Now, to be clear, we're not asking any entity to file anything with the federal government, the IRS, but that same level of information that all other nonprofits are required by law to disclose to their donors and to the IRS. We're asking our entities to give that same level of information, that same level of disclosure to messengers and churches. Not required by law, not to any government agency, but to messengers and churches. And the reason asking for the 990 level information is because that's the industry standard for nonprofits. Now, our entities are not required by law to file a 990 because they are under a religious church exemption, and I'm glad for that. But I do believe that our churches and messengers ought to receive that same level of information. There is some financial disclosure that's found in the book of reports and the annuals and all of those things, ministry reports, but it's not at the same level of the 990, which is kind of base industry standard. And so I made a motion in New Orleans asking for that. It was referred to the executive committee, and over the course of the next year, the executive committee, their finance subcommittee, deliberated on that motion and came out the day before the convention in Indianapolis and said, we're not going to bring it out for a vote. Now, I think it's important to remember that there was nothing, out of order with the motion. There was, it was well within, there were no legal, outstanding legal questions or anything like that. It was germane. It was in order. It was all of those things, which means it should have been brought out for messengers to have a vote on. Now, messengers want to vote it down. They don't want that kind of transparency. Okay. Instead, it was killed in the subcommittee of the executive committee, and this full executive committee never got a chance to vote on it, and messengers never got a chance to vote on it. Instead, the EC said that they're going to bring a plan for enhanced transparency was the phrase they use, to messengers in Dallas. Well, I thought messengers really deserved an opportunity to vote on this. So I made a very similar motion in Indianapolis, changing the wording just a little bit to be extra clear that we want to protect missionary safety. There were questions. I don't think there was anything in the 990 that put any missionaries at risk as it was. You're not listing any individual missionary names. You're not naming any of, compromising information, people in dangerous places. However, just to be extra clear on that, in case there's something that I didn't know about or think about, we gave the option in that motion for trustees to be able to say, no, this will put missionaries in danger. We're going to redact this. And so made that motion, hoping to get a vote on it in Indianapolis. Unfortunately, it was, again, referred to the executive committee. asked to, I challenged to overrule the chair, that decision to get it scheduled for a vote. Needed 51% for that, and we came up short on that. Now, the problem with trying to make a motion like that is, one, you're going against what the platform has ruled. That's just hard to do in a meeting of that size. But also, you don't get any debate when you do that, just by Robert's Rules of Order. And so I don't know, how much everybody knew what we were talking about at the time. So anyway, that got referred to the executive committee, where again, it was killed in the finance committee subcommittee. This time, not waiting all the way until June, but it got killed at the very first opportunity in September. And then in February's executive committee meeting, they come out with what is, they had promised to be a plan for enhanced transparency. And they come out with, instead of any kind of plan for financial transparency, they come out with a whole new business and financial plan.
A rewrite.
And in some ways, they're trying to make it more efficient. Word count is much less, but it is not enhanced transparency. It's actually less transparent in a few key places. And then also just a few other things that not necessarily transparency related, but finance related, that I think are some, potentially some very problematic for our convention, and that they're trying to get in this business and financial plan rewrite. But as it goes to transparency, just to give you one clear example of where it falls short even of our current transparency practices, or at least rules, not really our practices. The current financial plan says that messengers have a right to all sorts of financial information, including salary structures. And so if you go and you ask any of our entities for their salary structures, some of those entities will comply, and they'll give you a salary range, not full compensation like the 990 would require, but a salary range. And it's to varying degrees helpful information. Some entities will make you sign something saying you won't tell anybody. Some will just give it to you outright. Some entities won't reply at all. And then two of our entities, our two mission boards, North American Mission Board and the International Mission Board, they respond back and say, our trustees set the salaries. That's your information. Well, it says we ought to get salary structures, salary scales. But instead they say, our trustees set the salary, and that's the information that you get. They're reinterpreting that rule, Article 14 of the Business and Financial Plan. Well, the new plan codifies that. And I don't have it in front of me at the moment, but it basically says that the messengers will have the right to know about the process that entities use to set compensation and salary. And that's the language that the IMB and the North American Mission Board use. So it's codifying their current flagrant violation of our business and financial plan. And so it's bringing the rules into conformity with their in compliance. That's what's going on. And it's less transparent than what we have now. And if you go read Article 14 of the Business and Financial Plan, it lists out several key components of financial information that messengers have rights to know. They can inquire and know about it. That's much more expansive than just salary structures. All that goes away in the new plan. All of that goes away. And so it is a less transparent document, called enhanced transparency. It's the exact opposite. So that's where we are heading into Dallas. There are a couple of things that I would ask messengers to have at the forefront of their minds as it relates to transparency. And that is, there's a new business and financial plan being proposed that is less transparent than what we currently have, and is problematic in a number of areas. That's number one. And then number two, I think we need to defeat that or significantly amend it. And then number two is we want to get a vote on 990 level of transparency. This is the solution that is just a very basic solution. But it's a solution that can give us some real progress towards transparency and towards rebuilding trust.
Well, Rhett, that was very helpful. And honestly, I'm just shocked. I mean, I've been paying attention to this, but when you cover it all again like that, it's just shocking. What do these guys have to hide? Why are we killing, germane motions made in order at the subcommittee level year over year? Not even bringing it to the full executive committee and not bringing it out to Southern Baptists for a vote. Why are these guys doing this? And who's responsible for this? And why are we moving backwards? I mean, there's just so many questions here. I mean, why are we being governed essentially like we're Presbyterians, as if the subcommittee, the subcommittee for the EC on financial stewardship is some ruling body of Presbyterians who get to decide what we get to talk about and vote about and debate as Baptists? What's going on here?
So, I mean, I don't know that I can answer that with any degree of certainty. Here's what I think is going on, at least part of it. Part of the answer to that question is our entities don't want this, or at least a significant number of our entities don't want this. And therefore, they're having influence over our committee. It's upside down. It is that kind of Presbyterian model in some ways that they're getting what they want there. And so just to illustrate, originally I made that motion in June of 2023 in New Orleans. I was then invited and received an invitation in August for the September executive committee meeting. At that time, they let you come and present for 5 minutes and answer any questions before the subcommittee. They don't currently do that anymore, by the way. This year, I got to submit a 2-page document rather than going and talking to anybody. But at that time, you got to go and speak for 5 minutes. So I received that invitation to go in September, and then that invitation, they said that we're going to postpone the financial transparency talk. There were some other things legitimate things going on as far as resignations with some people at the executive committee. And they said, we're going to pause on this. We'll take it up in February, come back in February. That's fine. That's what I did. Had a great time. They treated me well. As far as getting to speak to them, I really appreciated that. But I found out in February that they didn't just completely punt and completely pause that conversation in September. No, the entity heads, a number of them, I don't know all or not, but a number of entity heads, I was led to believe it was all of them, but I don't know that for sure. They came in and were allowed to speak to this issue in the September meeting of the finance committee. And so the entity heads were able to express, their various displeasures with it. And so that's what I think is going on, is entities don't want it. I could be mistaken there. I'm happy to be corrected on that front. I would love for one of our entity heads to come out and support this and show how wrong I am on that. But that's where I think we are now. I think it's undue influence from the entities that don't want this. Why they don't want it, I don't want to speak to. I don't know. But put it this way, nobody supported it, and so by not supporting it, it's opposing it.
Well, obviously, and they've had multiple years of an opportunity to voice support for it if they did. And we've, of course, heard a variety of rumors, chatter that behind the scenes they are opposing it, and even tarnishing it with unfair allegations like this would compromise missionaries, which it certainly wouldn't in any way, shape, or form. But
for example, if you don't mind me interrupting, my apologies.
Yeah.
But for example, on that, Mr. Chip Wood at the International Mission Board last year, right before the annual meeting at whatever the trustee meeting was before the annual meeting, he spoke to his trustees, and he addressed 990 to them, which I appreciated. But it was just things that just aren't true. Now, I'm not saying he's lying, but he was definitely mistaken. And it was things that were flat out not the case about the 990s and the implication of 990 level transparency. And so that was definitely happened. That was reported on in Baptist Press. Things that are happening privately, I can't speak to, but that was reported in Baptist Press as things that are just flat not the case.
Yeah. When I think about this issue, when I sit down with you and, read anything you're writing, it really does get me pretty worked up because, from what I understand here, it's that one, not only are we not getting the financial transparency that is obligated to us as Southern Baptist churches, because when you tried to go get just one of those pieces of information, the salary structures, all right. So, although it might be you that's frozen this time instead of me, I can't tell. But our entities are not complying with what's being asked of us, demanded of them right now. When you try to secure more financial transparency, the subcommittee at the executive committee stonewalls it. It's just so not open even the plan to the point where transparency than we currently have. mean, this just seems so backwards. What do you think the message is that's being sent to Southern Baptist churches?
Can you hear me, William, right now?
Yeah, I can. It's every day. It's something, Rhett. I was saying, yesterday was an echo. Today it's internet speed. I have no idea why. But
I have no idea.
All we have to do.
I have no idea what you just said, other than the last thing, which was about Southern. What are we to make of this? And
they're smearing the effort. They're not even doing what they're supposed to be doing. What should good faith Southern Baptist churches make of this?
So I think Southern Baptists ought to. I think what they ought to make about it is they ought to really ask some questions. But some of those questions that you were asking a little while ago, they ought to ask, why? Why is this happening? What are they hiding? And the question that maybe nothing, that they're not hiding anything, but we deserve to know that. And so I think Southern Baptists, what they're going to have to do is they're going to have to ask those questions. They're going to have to show up to the meeting and make those concerns known. And then they're also going to have to make decisions about what they're going to do as far as their own finances. Look, I'm not looking to advocate for anybody not giving to the cooperative program, but the reality is people aren't going to trust what they don't fund. And so, what are Southern Baptists to make of it? Well, they ought to, take the lesson that, look, if they're not going to give us this transparency, there must be something that is going on behind the scenes that they don't want us to know about. And I don't want to cast aspersions or bad motives on anybody, but that's the natural question and reaction that Southern Baptists are going to have. And so what I think Southern Baptists need to make of it is they need to make a concerted effort to get to Dallas. They need to make a concerted effort to vote against this new business and financial plan. And they need to make a concerted effort to vote for 990 level transparency. And my apologies if that didn't really get at your question, but I couldn't hear what your question was because of the internet. So we'll try again in a moment.
No, that's great. Look, here from my experience doing live streams and running into tech issues every time because tech hates me. The trick is just to act like nothing's happening and just keep talking. And we're recording this and we'll repost it as a podcast. And so it will be, it will work out. I'm hearing though that you maybe need to get your mic volume up a little bit if possible, but I think you're right. Fundamentally, Baptists deserve a chance to vote on this. And when I think of how the entity heads are opposing it, that brings us into a very important next topic of conversation here, which is that it's not just that we want to know these numbers. We do want to know these numbers because we want to see if our entities are stewarding the money that they're being given out of the goodness of the hearts and the bank accounts of Southern Baptists across the country. I mean, these are your salt of the earth, grandmas and grandpas, families with 3, 4, 5 kids who are making financial sacrifices because they love the Lord and they trust him to give to their church. And that church is taking some of that money and sending it on. Like this isn't money just appearing out of nowhere that these entities have no obligation whatsoever to account for. It's coming from us, the Southern Baptists. So we do want to know these numbers, but the increased financial transparency you are arguing is a major key, and John Whitehead is arguing this too, to unlocking trustee accountability, which is the trustee system in the SBC is broken in many ways. And that point I was making earlier, how is it that the entity heads are getting away with opposing increased financial transparency? And the answer is because the trustee boards are not holding them accountable to do it. If I was a Southern Baptist Convention entity trustee right now, I would be going there before the board, before the president that I'm managing and saying, we should support this. You should support this. Trustee boards should be taking votes that require the entity heads to support this, but they're not. So explain how increased transparency will actually deliver much needed and long overdue trustee reform and trustee accountability.
Absolutely. So first, let me just mention that or echo what you just said, which is that our trustee system is not working. And I think you'll find pretty wide support for that idea across our convention. This isn't just something that people who like to read Center for Baptist Leadership would say. This is something, around our convention would say our trustee system just doesn't seem to be working quite well. And on that point, I would just point out as well, financial transparency is one of those issues that cuts across all of the various wings of Southern Baptist life as well. But to your question, the trustee system is not working. So Southwestern Seminary spent $140 million they didn't have over a period of 20 years. And how that happens under vigilant, diligent trustee oversight, I'm not exactly sure. International Mission Board, for about 6 years, I think it's like $210 million of deficit spending. The end result of that, and I was on the field when this happened, the end result of that is we lost about 1,000 missionaries, I think 700 or 800 of whom were some of our most experienced missionaries, and we lost them because we had to draw back our missionary force because we didn't have the money and we overspent. Now, I'm sure there's some decent reasons for why that happened to a degree of some sort of deficit spending, but $210 million over 6 years. We had trustees, but where was the oversight on that? You have things like Tom Rayner getting a golden parachute, reportedly $1 million on his way out after a failure of leadership where Lifeway is losing $30-something million a year. And then he gets $1 million on the way out. Did the full trustee board know about that? Not reportedly. One trustee knew about that and signed off on it. So you have things like that. You have conflicts of interest with the North American Mission Board and others that have been reported. And so there's all these issues where the trustees are supposed to be doing and taking care of that. And that's how our system is designed, where messengers appoint trustees, trustees hold those entities in trust for the messengers in the churches. And that way the messengers in churches, they can go on about their local ministry, knowing that there are some that we've designated from among us who will go and hold those entities accountable. But that's not really what happens. From my conversations with some trustees and hearing trustees talk, a lot of times what you have are trustees will end up becoming more like brand ambassadors for the entity, representing the entity to the churches rather than representing the churches to the entity. And what happens is they don't really ever hold anybody to account on things until something blows up, until something's just really bad and it's really public. And then that's when they'll step in, but they don't step in to keep those things from happening, and so how does that relate to financial transparency? This isn't the only way we can help our trustees, but it is a key way because it introduces public accountability for one of the main things that they do. So one of the main things that trustees do that sets the the direction for the organization and holds it in trust is they set the compensation package for the CEO, for the entity head. So if you go read nonprofit corporate theory and those type of things, they're going to talk about one of the main things that trustees do is set the CEO salary. Well, so many of our trustees don't know what. Not only are they'll vote on a percentage increase, but nobody knows what the salary is. Maybe a small team on the executive committee of the board, a 5 or 6 member executive committee might know. Some of them might not know. Or people who knew the original number, they rotate off the board, and what's left are people voting on percentage increases every year. And so that key piece of financial information of executive compensation is one that when it's known by everybody, it holds the trustees accountable because now they've got to defend it. Now they've got to give an account for it. Now, please hear me clearly. We're not asking for this information because we don't want our Southern Baptist leaders making a good salary. It makes perfect sense to me that somebody that leads a large organization makes a large salary. So that's not an issue. The issue is, are the trustees that we as messengers appointing, are they doing their job in holding the entities in trust? And so, for an example, if you have a seminary and the executive compensation, and by the way, the 990 will show the top 5 in an organization executive compensation. It doesn't show the salary of everybody. Your adjunct New Testament prof, his salary isn't going on a 990. It's your top 5 salaries. It's your key employees, and there's some specific definitions of what a key employee is. And so it's your top 5. But if you have that executive compensation skyrocketing at the same time that you have enrollment tanking, well, what that tells you is you have an administrative problem, but what it really tells you is you have a trustee problem. And so Southern Baptists need to know that. That's just one example. But what it forces is accountability, and that's what we need. And so people talk a lot about trustee training. I am in favor of trustee training. I think we need trustee training. Need to remind people they're holding, and it doesn't need to be done by the entity. It needs to be done by a third party. But John Whitehead said this, and I agree with him, that transparency really is the trustee training we need, because accountability, having to give a public accounting for your most important actions, that will train you to do what is right by the people who you are representing and holding an entity in trust for. So that's the connection between 990 level transparency and trusteeship.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many problems that this would solve. It really just it blows my mind that it is being opposed essentially by the deep state of the SBC. And there are so many overlaps here, and you don't have to get into it if you want to keep your hands clean, but I don't care, right? So it's like we look at what's happening in the federal government and what Elon Musk is doing with Doge, what Donald Trump is trying to do in terms of giving us more insight into our tax dollars are being spent or wasted on ridiculous programs at home and abroad, and trying to cut out ridiculous unnecessary spending. We live in an age of great institutional distrust and decline. And why is that? Well, it's because the institutions that have been built to represent a certain constituency of people are not working in their interests. And they're not working in their interests because we don't know what they're doing or why they're doing it. And so, as Ronald Reagan said, sunlight is the best disinfectant, right? Opening the books gives us increased confidence. And so if we were to do this, I mean, it's crazy to me. This thing, you said it's not a silver bullet, and I agree, but it's about the next best thing we could get to one, which one, it would give us accountability for our entities, and two, it would help reform our broken trustee system. I can't think of anything else more needed in Southern Baptist life right now to turn the entire ship of the SBC around than this proposal that you are offering. And my wife tuned in. Well, I was listening to that space you did with Garrett. Is it Garrett Robinson?
Yes.
All right. So you and Garrett did a space. Garrett and us or me don't agree on everything. That's fine. We agree on this. So I was very interestingly listening to that space you did with him. My wife's not particularly involved in any of this stuff, doesn't tune in, but she caught like the last 15, 20 minutes of that. We got to the end of it. She says, that just seems like common sense. Why would anybody be against it? And so, Rhett, what is your plea to messengers coming to Dallas, as we have hopefully a chance to vote on this again, to just sort of do the right thing, do the common sense thing? What is it that you want messengers coming prepared to do?
What we want messengers coming prepared to do is to take action. I want messengers to come prepared to take action. That action may take the form of voting against the proposed business and financial plan because it's less transparent and it introduces other problematic financial, issues as well. I want messengers to come prepared to take action to vote for 990 level transparency. That would likely mean overruling the chair if it gets referred by the committee on the order of business, if it gets referred to the executive committee to bring it out to allow us to vote. I would like messengers to, you mentioned Doge just a little while ago, and it's not that our Southern Baptist entities are as bad and corrupt as USAID and those type of things. I don't mean to say that, but there is something of parallel there. And the reason that Doge has been a success and has been so popular is because it's peeled back the curtain a little bit on what our government, our tax dollars, were the stakeholders in the U.S. federal government, right, by paying taxes, of what it was going to fund and how it was being used and how it's being misused. And so I think there is a renewed interest in that in the culture at large. And I hope that messengers bring that renewed interest, because if our government should be more efficient, if our government, federal government, ought to be more transparent, then I think our churches should be, and our church organizations and our denominational entities ought to be more efficient, and they ought to be more transparent. And so I want messengers to get up to speed with what this is. And that this isn't a bunch of malcontents who are mad that somebody at a seminary or a mission board makes a bunch of money and I don't make a bunch of money here and I'm mad about it. That's not what this is. This is about taking the the institutions that we have inherited from our fathers and mothers in the faith. And, 100 years of the cooperative program we're celebrating this year. And it's about seeing that through, for another 100 years. It's about the future of our missions together. It's about, there's pictures behind me of where we lived in Central Asia. And I think about the people that are in that city. They have little no access to the gospel. It's about sending missionaries to them so they hear the good news that of what we just celebrated last weekend, that Christ died, that Christ is risen, and Christ is coming again, and you need to repent and believe. And that's the message we want to get out to the world. I want to see them to see the connection between our finances and that mission. Too many times people think that, they don't want to deal with the icky stuff of money. They don't want to deal with the icky stuff of denominational politics and all of that. But as you said, the money is the gas that goes into the engine that fuels our Great Commission work and our Great Commission partnership. So I want people to connect those dots. So I've tried to help people connect those dots with a website that I just published yesterday, SBC.
Yeah, let me pull it up.
SBCtransparency.net. And, it's not a flashy website or anything. I'm a pastor, not a web developer. But just trying to put together a one-stop shop that people can go to get the basics of what we're talking about here. I'm just looking for some basic messenger education on the issue of financial transparency. Want them to be able to have a place to go where they can get their questions answered. Because when I see this being discussed in various Southern Baptist Facebook groups, there's just all sorts of just misunderstanding. People, they're not really grasping what we're talking about. No, we're not filing anything with the federal government. No, this isn't going to put your church's tax exempt status in jeopardy. No, we're not disclosing everybody's salary. No, our missionaries in Muslim countries aren't going to be listed here. No, on down the line of things that people are misunderstanding. And so one of the places where, you can go and there's the FAQs and you can see if your question's there. If your question's not there, you can go to the about page. My email address is there. I want to connect with Southern Baptists. Somebody has a question about this, feel free to email me, find me on X, find me on Facebook, and let's talk about it. One of the places where some of our resources are all in one place. And so there's a page on there that has a number of articles and essays that I've written, or some conversations. Mentioned the X space that I did with Garrett Robinson, which, by the way, I would encourage you to go to listen to that. Not for anything that I said, but Garrett really did an excellent job there. He used to be on church staff and ministry, serving as a pastor, and is currently, I believe, in like nonprofit management consulting work. And so he brings a really unique perspective there, and just does an excellent job, I think, of outlining why this is a normal thing that we're asking for. We're not asking for anything outlandish. We're not asking for anything that's extreme. We're not asking for anything that just your normal nonprofits don't give. This is actually just kind of standard. The thought that this is some sort of just really out there idea that is an imposition upon our entities is ludicrous. This is normal, standard operating procedure. We ought to do it. And it's simple. It's not hard. It's something that we can do. It won't cost much money, and we can do it fairly easily. We have the information there. And then the point I try to bring up in that conversation and in other places is Baptist. It applies Baptist congregationalism to convention governance. We're not Presbyterians, and the neo-Presbyterianism of the executive committee is not Baptist, and we ought not conduct our business that way. Bring it out for a vote, and let's trust the Spirit's work in the messengers. And that's what we're asking for. And so Garrett, did a great job in that space. But there's also there's an article from him, and there's a few other articles from other people as well, including the ones that I've written for Center for Baptist Leadership. And so that website is a place that you can point people to who have no idea what we're talking about. And maybe they have some questions. Maybe they have, a misunderstanding of what we're talking about. And you can send them to sbctransparency.net and just have a one-stop shop of what we're talking about. And that you're showing right now is the heart of it. It's transparency in service of the Great Commission. It is for, rebuilding trust so that we can keep the engine going and funding missionaries and send them around the world.
Well, Rhett, I think it's a great looking website, man. I think if you're listening to this and you're a Southern Baptist pastor or lay member and you're coming to Dallas, and if you aren't, you need to be. If you took, 20 minutes to plink around on this website, I don't see how you wouldn't be sold on the need for this motion and for increased transparency. And this is Chris. You made a scorecard, Rhett. I love it. This brings me back to my days working in politics, where you would score the votes of your elected representatives, and that's very much, in many ways, what these organizations are to us, our elected representatives. That's a lot of red, Rhett. What do you have to say to that?
It's a lot of red. Let me first. I always like to talk about positive things where I can. There are a number of green things there. Those are your entities who complied when me and a couple of friends emailed them asking for salary structures. So I want to applaud those. Had conversations with a few of the CFOs who were gracious enough with their time. And so I commend them in that. But the rest of it's a bunch of red. And so has any entity, and we had one who will come out and support the 990 motion? We have none. Do we have entities that comply with our current rules on salary structure disclosure? Well, about half of them do not. Do any of them let you know what the top 5 executive compensations are? Not a one. What about conflicts of interest? Not a one. Are they disclosing those things? And that's, I'm gonna be honest with you, that's one that I'm really interested in as it relates to the 990, is because there's a lot of double dipping in SBC life of people making salaries from several different entities. There's instances where you have a trustee and by virtue of an office that they're holding, and a spouse is working for the entity, or you have a trustee and they're also have contracts getting paid. We don't know how much, but getting paid by the entity that they are a trustee of. So there's things like that with the conflicts of interest that I think Southern Baptists ought to know. And there might be good reasons to do some of those things. I don't think we necessarily just, throw it all out, rule it all out, but I think it ought to be done in the open. And that is not currently what's happening. So what you see there then is a bunch of red, because those are the areas where we don't have transparency.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think you should make this like a downloadable PDF. Okay. I think that'd be helpful for folks, and I'll make sure to get that up online as well. I mean, it is so basic. I love the way you describe it back at the start of the website here, where you just say it's normal, it's simple, and it's Baptist, right? I mean, none of this is anything new or crazy. Rhett, is it true that Planned Parenthood is more transparent than the Southern Baptist Convention?
Well, it's true that they file a 990 and none of our Southern Baptist entities do. Therefore, we can know what the CEO of Planned Parenthood makes. You don't know what the CEO of North American Mission Board or whatever seminary, what they make. And again, that's not a morbid curiosity. That's just a trustee accountability thing. But yeah,
Rhett, I'm about to stop with the caveats myself. I mean, you feel free to keep making them all the way to Dallas, but this is so basic. This is so biblical. This is so needed that, if people want to assume it's because of some morbid curiosity to know what Kevin Ezell is making or anything else, I mean, shame on them, right? Like if you can't reason yourself as a pastor to why this is necessary without somebody holding your hand and making a bunch of caveats, oh, it's not this, it's not that, like what are you doing, right? I mean, I know you can keep being nice and making those caveats, but there's no other major nonprofit that functions like this, right? And most churches, some churches do, right? But you and I would argue that healthy churches, transparent churches, make their books available to their people. I mean, yep. Don't you have a story about how when you took over First Baptist Travelers Rest, or even currently, that like your budget is available there in the entry?
It has been. I don't know if there's currently any left, but yeah, there were. In the foyer, there's the budget, has my salary there. Come out the back door, it was sitting for a while. There was a stack just sitting in the chair next to the door, and I walked by it every time I went in or went out of the sanctuary and left it right there. It doesn't bother me. I am grateful for how the church takes care of me and have nothing to hide there. So yeah, it's just kind of normal and standard in a lot of places. To go back, you're talking about caveats there. I think it's interesting, and maybe I should make them, maybe I shouldn't. But I think the reason that I do is because it's really interesting. You kind of feel this need to, because anybody who's asked for accountability over the last 5-10 years is just disparaged as being the crazy uncle at the convention, as being the troublemaker, as being the one who's stirring up dissension. And so I guess you kind of feel like you want to empty that chamber first. But that's not really very charitable, and that's not the right way to look at people who are trying to help the health of the convention. These are, again, this isn't anything outlandish. This is normal. This is how every other nonprofit operates. What's so special about us? We don't have to tell our shareholders basic industry standard level financial information. And so I don't think we ought to disparage people for asking about these things or telling them that they're troublemakers because they don't just go along with the program of however they're told to go along with the program. And I think increasingly you're going to find messengers who don't go along with the program. Now, maybe they get to a microphone at a convention and maybe they don't. But what they're not going to do is they're not going to fund it because they don't trust it.
Yeah. I think that really the burden of proof is on the people who oppose this to explain why. The burden of proof is not on brothers like yourself and the other people who have been fighting for increased financial transparency in the Southern Baptist Convention. This really is just one of those no-brainers where it's like, oh, you don't support this? And honestly, if you don't, that raises a question for me. Because if you don't have anything to hide, why don't you support this?
Yeah. And that's the thing. I haven't heard a really good argument against it. I've heard some things that just aren't true about it. I've heard some scare tactics about it, but I haven't heard anyone from the executive committee, from the the finance committee, from an entity or anything. I haven't heard anybody give actually, this isn't a good solution for these reasons, and it'll serve our convention health and rebuild trust and transparency. Nobody gives that kind of argument. The only thing they do is say, nope, or they say things that just aren't true. And that's what's been disheartening about the last couple of years is nobody is offering any kind of reasons about why this isn't good. They're just offering things to try to scare people away from it. This is going to do something down the road, but it's demonstrably not going to do that. It can't do that. There's not that's not the one that comes to mind just right off the top of my head is that's going to lead to, we're going to lose our tax exempt status. And it's like, that's not how the law works here.
Right.
But people will keep on saying that. And so there's no arguments for something else. There's no arguments against it. It's just brute. We're not going to do that because we don't want to. And instead, here's a new business and financial plan that's less transparent.
Yeah, no, they're not going to do it unless we make them do it, which raises, that raises a whole host of questions. Well, I want to tease out something here and you can reply to it. I think what has happened is that over the last many decades, there's been an additional sort of structure and industry built up on top of and embedded within the Southern Baptist Convention that is not devoted to church planting, theological education, and training and sending missionaries, but is the purpose of that system is to create an industry in SBC life for ladder climbers, for guys to rise through the ranks of entities, to get cushy VP positions at NAM doing church planting training, or, bureaucratic bloat at the IMB, or for good boys in the club to land, as professors at different seminaries. But really, most of it's happening. A lot of it is happening at NAM. That's where so much of this is going on. And so it's the mission, the central mission of the Southern Baptist Convention is in no way threatened by 990 level transparency. This side quest and this, additional development of an industrial complex that is sort of parasitically embedded itself within the Southern Baptist Convention, I think that is what is at danger of being exposed through this. And there are a lot of people in the Southern Baptist Convention who not only benefit from that system, but there's a lot of people who want to benefit from that system. And if we expose this, then the great calling before the Lord to just be a faithful local church pastor is all that's left for those guys. Thoughts on that, Rhett? If you don't want to touch it, that's fine. But I wanted to share that thought.
Yeah. So the thing that comes to mind there, and we mentioned Doge and USAID earlier, and I don't know, a 990 probably wouldn't help us here, but I think something interesting that Southern Baptists, deserve to know. would be, how many people is NAM paying to come to the convention? How many catalysts how many people in a part-time contract role are on NAM's payroll in various states at some level of support for month? They're not talking about the church planners and all, that, but just, they're the church planting catalysts. They're the mobilizers. They're the this, they're the that. How many of those type of things do we have that NAM's paying for? Those are some of the questions that I have that relate to, that incentive structure that is at play with Southern Baptist Missions money. I'd love to know that out. I don't know that a 990 would necessarily shed too much light on those specific questions, but what it would do is bring accountability, greater increased accountability to our trustees and to the entities themselves. And that's just what we need.
Yeah, and back to that trustee point. I mean, if we don't solve this, our entities will, just continue on this track of mission drift to the point where people just don't trust them anymore. There's an older brother at my church who has had a very successful career in the corporate world, in healthcare, healthcare industry. And he read Megan Basham's book. And after he was done reading it, he came up to me. He's like, I cannot believe what I found in this book. And so when we started talking about financial transparency and the Southern Baptist Convention and what's going on here with the trustees, and he says, this is just completely backwards. I have been a CEO. I have been a trustee. And trustees have one job and one job only, and that is to be laser-like focused on whether or not the CEO is executing on the mission for the organization. They are not his cheerleaders. They are not his PR agents. They are not brand ambassadors for the company or for the entity. Their job is to hold him accountable. And we've completely lost that in the Southern Baptist Convention. And look at what's going on at the ERLC. I mean, that is a great example, right? The ERLC is not necessarily one of the main entities that we point to in terms of financial malfeasance. But as we pointed out at the Center for Baptist Leadership with Sam Webb's article, when Brent was trying to give this $250,000 commitment from the ERLC to the Abuse Reform Implementation Task Force as it was winding down, and they were trying to start a new nonprofit that would be outside the SBC, one that violated the business and financial plan. You couldn't do that. And, but look, the trustees aren't holding Brent accountable to the mission there whatsoever. They're just circling the wagon for him and cheerleading for him. And that's happening everywhere. And if we don't have honest trustees doing their job, one by one, these entities will collapse, which is what we're seeing already. Rhett, how many times have you had folks come to your church in the last few years looking to join, and they've asked you, does your church give money to the ERLC or to NAM or to this or to the cooperative program, and they don't like it? And how many other pastors have you heard say the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So it became, when I first, I've been at this church almost 3 years, and you started having membership interviews. And one of the questions people would ask at an increasing level was, does our tithe money go to the ERLC? Does our tithe money go to the cooperative? I don't want my tithe money going to that. And it was always either ERLC or transparency. Those were the two issues. Now, granted, these are some people who are kind of plugged in and paying attention. A lot of people aren't paying attention, but there were enough that were, and they knew that they didn't trust the ERLC because they didn't feel like they were advocating, on behalf of Southern Baptists, in DC, but rather advocating on behalf of DC to Southern Baptists. And they knew that there was not, just base level financial transparency. And so what we've had to do in a few cases, what we've offered to do and are glad to do, but it's just an extra financial accounting step, is their offerings, their tithes and offerings are designated to the church and not included in the undesignated receipts where we give a percentage to the cooperative program, because they don't want to fund it. And we've had increased conversations with people who've been in our church for a long time. And this isn't just young malcontents. There's I think he's 95, older gentleman in our church who sees some of what I post about transparency on Facebook. And he has a lot of questions about, are we going to keep doing this? Are we going to keep supporting this? And we've had others. And so our church currently is reevaluating what we're going to do. We've continued to give 10% to the cooperative program, as our church has, I guess, for the last 100 years. But we're evaluating that because we have people in our church, people coming into our church who they don't want to support entities and institutions that they can't trust. And and it might be that, I think we can still trust, a lot of there's some entities I have some questions about, but I think there's still good reason to trust a lot of our Southern Baptist entities. But we've got to rebuild that. And the way to rebuild it, I think the burden of proof is on the entities. The way to rebuild that is some basic financial disclosure to say, hey, we don't have anything to hide. Here, look, here's this. Here's what, if we could get one entity CEO to say, here's my compensation, it would break the spell about it. We would see that everything just doesn't get set on fire and everything's bad. And it would also put a lot of pressure on the others. But what it would do mainly is that CEO would earn a ton of respect from Southern Baptists because they're just being humble, honest servants of Christ. And I'm not saying they're not humble, honest servants of Christ, because they don't do that. But it takes a little bit of hubris to say, send us your money and we're going to show you some really emotive videos a couple of times a year so that you'll send us your money. But no, you don't get to know these things. You don't get asked questions. That takes a little bit of gumption too. And I think if somebody said, you know what, we really appreciate the generosity of Southern Baptists, we're going to give you the base level information. Here it is. And if some entities were to do that, they regain a lot of trust. And there might, it might sting for a little bit if there's anything amiss. But Southern Baptists are people who love the gospel of Jesus Christ. They love to forgive and believe that things can be fixed. And so I think that storm would pass, and it would pass with a lot more trust and a lot more people behind it. And that particular entity and that particular leader would have a lot of trust going forward as well. So I'm hoping one will take us up on the offer.
Well, that's actually a really interesting point about humility there, Rhett, because humility is thinking rightly of yourself, right? Mm-hmm. It's not thinking too highly of yourself. And there's this false humility that, has people think too lowly of themselves. So if you're an entity head and you believe you deserve the compensation that you are getting, and you believe that you are running that organization well and stewarding the cooperative program percentage that comes to your entity on behalf of Southern Baptist and the other gifts and donations you're receiving to the glory of God and for the good of the church and for the spread of the gospel, you shouldn't be hesitant to share that information publicly, because that's a humble thing to do, even if it's a big salary, because you're saying, no, like I deserve this. And not only do I deserve this, but there's a whole team of people here. They're called the Board of Trustees that are affirming this salary for me. And so here we are, Southern Baptist. This is what I make. This is what we're doing. My trustee board stands with it. If you have concerns about it, you can talk to the trustees. But I'm going to be humble about it. That it wouldn't actually be a prideful thing. It would be, I think, a right exercise of true Christian humility for an entity head to make public what should be public, and then give us that information to hold them accountable. I mean, and so it's weird to resist that. That's exactly what every pastor does, right? Every pastor does that.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know why they bristle so much against it and don't want to do it, other than I think they think it's going to cause a lot of trouble for them. But the humble thing to do would be to take the trouble on themselves on behalf of the churches and the institution and the health of our convention. That's what love is. It secures the good of others, even if it costs me something, even at great expense to myself. That's what Christ did. And I think we can do that in our convention, and would love to see our entities embrace that for the health of our convention and for the health of our mission together going forward.
Yeah, that's really well said, brother. Just a second. My headphones are dying. I'm going to switch to a different speaker here. All right. Give me a mic check.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can still hear you. All right. Hopefully that didn't induce an echo. All right. So as we get to the end of this conversation, just spell out for us again what the specific actions are that are going to be needed to be taken in Dallas to avoid codifying more obscurity being sold as enhanced transparency, and to actually deliver real transparency for the sake of reviving the cooperative program and rebuilding trust in our Great Commission work here together going forward.
Yep. So number one action step is go to booking.com and get you a hotel room in Dallas and make plans to be in Dallas. But you can't do anything from your house. You can't do anything from your church office. That'll make any difference. What you got to do is be in that room. And once you're in that room, what we're asking you to do is twofold. And that is vote no on the new business and financial plan. Unless it is significantly amended and revised to include some 990 level transparency, to take out the codification of IMB and NAM's evasion of Article 14 with dealing with salary specials, things of that nature. Unless, some stuff amended about raising money from outside churches and some of those other things that are in there. Unless we can get all that out, I'm prepared to vote no on the new business and financial plan. And then the second thing is when there's a motion to amend the current business and financial plan, or to amend that one to include 990 level transparency, language there would probably be something like to publish the same scope and detail as would be required on a 990, and then has all the qualifications, excluding the donor schedule B, excluding anything that will compromise missionary safety. When that motion is made, vote for it. And when that motion is referred to the executive committee, and somebody says, no, let's schedule this for a vote, there's no debate on it. You got to know what this is. You got to come educated, and then vote to schedule it so that we can have debate about it and handle this like Baptists. Handle this like Southern Baptists handle everything else. Talk about it, and somebody can get up on a mic and they can tell us why this is a bad idea. And somebody else can get up on a mic and say why it's a good one. And when we do that, then be prepared to vote for it. So those are really boil it all down. Get there, be in the room while you're there, defeat the proposed business and financial plan, and vote for any 990 level transparency motions from the floor, including overriding the referral to the executive committee. Because what we've learned is anything that goes to the executive committee, it's like taking that motion, wadding it up, throwing it in the trash can, because it's going to die there, and you're not even getting talk about it. And so we're not Presbyterians. We don't need to let the executive committee to do whatever they're going to do with it. What we need is to bring it out like Baptists, talk about it, and let's make a decision together under the leadership of the Holy Spirit. That's the way Southern Baptists make decisions. So that's what we need to be prepared to do.
Yeah, well said, Brother Rhett. And where can people, we're having this conversation. You've got your website up. It's sbctransparency.net. That's correct?
That is correct.
sbctransparency.net. You're on Facebook. You're on X. What's your X handle?
It is Rhett _ Burns.
Rhett _ Burns.
_BURNS.
Are you going to hold some more sort of internet town halls for folks on this issue?
I'd like to do that. There's a link on the website to the last one that we did. We did the Zoom Pastors Digital Town Hall. I'd like to do at least one more, maybe a couple more of those, to give an opportunity for regular messengers, pastors, laymen. Last one they would do is mostly pastors, but we'll do one that opens up the laymen as well. And let's just talk about what are the issues. We'll have questions. Let's talk about those questions, and just putting this out there for people. So yeah, we'll look at doing things on Zoom that I'll be posting on Facebook and things like that, and then also we'll do some next spaces.
Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, obviously, messenger education is so important on this one, and I trust we'll have some pamphlets and things like that to pass out at the convention as well. And if I was an entity head or a member of the executive committee or the executive subcommittee that's killed this multiple years in a row, which all those people have names, and look, I won't name them right now and make you squirm, but these aren't faceless people. Like I really want Southern Baptists to understand that it's not just a nameless, faceless bureaucracy that's killing this. There are people who are subcommittee chairs. There are people on those subcommittees. I mean, we all know who the chairman and CEO and president and executive committee is, right? There are real people with real names and real faces who are blocking you and this effort, which is, I think, is worth pointing out. But if I were one of those people, what would you say to me? If this doesn't get secured this year, do you think this is an effort that's just going to go away? be swept under the rug, or you think whether it's not you next year, it'll be somebody else? What's your take on that?
Yeah. What I've said to some of those people, and what I would say now, and to anybody else, is no, this issue's not going away. People who are concerned about transparency and trust, people who love the Great Commission and our Southern Baptist War, we're not just stop hearing about the Great Commission because Jeff Ords wants to block this. No, we're not going to do that. We're going to continue to care about our convention, and we're not just going to roll over and hand it over to people who want to take our money and do everything else behind closed doors. That's just not what Southern Baptists are going to do. What I think we're going to see happen is increasingly every year more people are going to be thinking, wait a second, that sounds like Cummins. Look at your wife, she's listening to the expert. That sounds like Cummins. Why is that? And more people are going, and until it hits critical mass. And I don't know if that's this year or not. And it might be somebody else who takes his time and runs with this and can do a better job of mobilizing people than I've been able to do. And I'll praise God for that. But it's not going away. But I will say this, it's going to be much harder if we adopt a new business and financial plan. That's going to add some barriers for messengers in the coming years, because what this does is it solidifies within our governing documents the obscurity. It codifies that obscurity. Now we won't be able to say, well, our governing documents say this, you're not doing this. That's the deal. We can't say that anymore, because they'll say, no, the governing documents say this. You don't have any right to this. What are you talking about? I'll tell you about the process. Trust these salary. That's all you need to know. Messenger. And so, no, it's not going away, but if we do this new business and financial plan, it will be more difficult. It'll make successive efforts more difficult. So I think we need to defeat that in Dallas this year. But no, it's not going away, because we love our Lord. We love the Great Commission, and we want to see our Great Commission flourish for another 100 years. And we're not just going to, drop transparency so people can have their side quests, whatever they're doing with SBC money, in addition to our ministry. And so I would say it's just better to do the right thing now. That was my message when I went to the executive committee February 24th. My message was, let's just walk in the light. That was at the top of the document that I gave you. Walk in the light. It's just the right thing to do. The normal thing to do. It's the simple thing to do. It's the Baptist thing to do. Last thing, it's the right thing to do. So let's just do the right thing. I think that's a compelling message. I think people who are filled with the Spirit want to do the right thing. So that's what I would tell them. I would implore them to do the right thing. I'm thinking of people in my church, been Southern Baptists all their life, been in this church for 50 years. One of them's our finance chairman. He's got a manila folder this thick, of record going back, and he carries around with him. He's meticulous with our financial information. He will answer any question anybody has. He'll tell you the exact dollar amounts in this account or that account or this investment or what we got saved on this repair. He'll tell you all of it. And he faithfully gives to our church, and that faithfully goes to the cooperative program and has for half a century. And I think people like that deserve base level, industry standard, financial disclosure of their missions dollars. And it's just the right thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's that simple, right? It is the right thing to do. And shame on us if we don't do it. If anybody's listening to this, that, is opposed to this, ye benighted entity heads and chairmans of our committees, I would just say this, you don't know better than my wife. You don't know better than my sweet wife, who I've been married to for over 10 years, who doesn't pay attention to any of this, and airdrops into a space with you and Garrett. I mean, Garrett's like a Harvard trained guy, right? He studied this. He studied this at Harvard. It's funny. The Harvard guys are coming to save the SBC, John Whitehead and Garrett Robinson. And Garrett, if you're listening to this, I know you don't like me that much on a lot of other issues, but I support you on this one. So, I've got your back on this one, Garrett. And,
he's really compelling on this. I think people need to read. He has an article over at the Baptist Review you can read, and on that X space. I'm sure you can find some other stuff on X that he's posted. But it's some really smart analysis of this stuff. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, well, so these guys, I don't care that you run NAM. You don't know better than my wife. You don't know better than these people at Rhett's church. You don't know better than the tens of thousands of Southern Baptist churches who deserve this transparency and whose trust, quite frankly, you are abusing. Because what you are counting on is that these people keep giving and don't ask questions. And when the people do start asking reasonable Christian questions about how the finances of the Southern Baptist Convention are being stewarded before God, you paint those people as troublemakers. We need this attitude to be completely reversed in Southern Baptist Convention life. And as you said, on the 100th anniversary of the cooperative program, and that connection between missions and money, and maybe you should write a little piece on that, right? It's like, it takes money to send missionaries. That's how we do it. That's why we do this, because we can do more together than we can separately, right? Because if you are part of the Southern Baptist Convention, you can send an aspiring missionary to the IMB to be trained and then supported and sent out in ways that you could not do if you were just an independent church. That's what it exists for. You can plant other churches together more than you can by yourself. And we are hurting our gospel mission, right? We are hurting our gospel mission. It actually reminds me of a little bit of, I think it's Acts 6, with the sort of proto deacons and dealing with the people who weren't getting the women and the children that weren't getting their allotment. And, they dealt with it, right? They didn't just sweep it under the rug. They dealt with a logistical issue that was going to hamper their gospel mission forthrightly and immediately. And that's a great example. And that's what we are not doing here. So, brother, I'm praying for you. I pray that your effort prevails. Folks, if you're listening to this, please check out sbctransparency.net. Make sure to read that article in particular about the problems with the proposed changes to the business and financial plan. And it really is. That's just sort of the rotten cherry on the top of this, cake, where they're trying to take the lack of transparency we currently have and rewrite it into our bylaws. That cannot be allowed to happen.
All the while saying that we're enhancing our transparency and we're doing this. We're giving you what you need on transparency. Honestly, it's kind of insulting.
Yeah, don't pee on my leg and tell me it's raining. Exactly. Right? I mean, that's what these guys are trying to do.
You would say.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the PG version, right? So don't sell me a dog and tell me it's a racehorse. So Rhett, man, I love you, brother. I'm so thankful for you and your work and your effort on this. Praying for your success. I pray that the Lord just really kind of blows doors open, expands your reach over this next month, moves in the hearts and the minds of our messengers as we prepare to gather in Dallas. And as you said, we do the right thing here for the sake of the gospel mission of the Southern Baptist Convention. Any other closing comments?
I just say I appreciate you bringing the spotlight onto this issue in the ways that you have. Both, through publishing at Center for Baptist Leadership, podcasts like this, spaces on Twitter and things of that nature. So really appreciate it. And for those listening, I appreciate you taking the time today, considering this. Thank you for going to sbctransparency.net and taking a look at the resources that are there. And my ask would be that you would take that link and that you would copy it into a text message and you'd send it to some other people that are going to be in Dallas, some pastor friends, you'd send it to your pastor. Send that around a little bit. Let people see what we're talking about. Spread that around would be my ask for those who are listening. And you have my gratitude. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time together today.
Yeah, well, thanks, brother. I'm going to hit our closer here and play it out and hide us, but you got to stay on so we can make sure to upload it. All right.
Sounds good.
Rhett, thanks for joining us, folks. Again, sbctransparency.net. Rhett Burns on Twitter, Rhett Burns on Facebook. We'll keep publishing on this at the Center for Baptist Leadership. Other people are doing great work on this too. Bobby Gilstrap keeps, running after this. We didn't even talk about Will McCraney and everything that's going on there. I mean, there are a lot of other good brothers. Garrett Robinson. I hope the Baptist Review does some more on this too, and that we can join together across, lines of denominational disagreements within the SBC and do the right thing and give our churches the financial transparency that they deserve. Thanks, Rhett.
Thank you.
The Center for Baptist Leadership podcast is powered by American Reformer, hosted by William Wolfe, with audio production by Jared Cummings. Our music is a custom remix of Soldiers of Christ in Truth Arrayed, the official hymn of Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. To help CBL reform and revitalize Christian institutions, please consider making a generous donation today at centerforbaptistleadership.org.